The first time he saw her, the air seemed to thicken, not from heat, but from awareness. She stood by the open window of the cafe, one hand resting against the frame, her dark hair swept up like she hadn't tried too hard. The late afternoon light caught the faint shimmer on her collarbone. She wasn't waiting for anyone, but she carried the quiet confidence of someone who knew how to be noticed without asking for it. He was supposed to meet a friend, grab a quick coffee, and leave. But something about her stillness made him slow down. Her eyes lifted just once, brief, almost careless, but in that single look, something shifted. A pause. Then she turned back to her cup, pretending to read, though the page hadn't turned in minutes. He took the seat across the room, close enough to feel her presence, far enough to pretend it didn't matter. The hum of the espresso machine filled the silence between them. He tried to focus on his phone, but his attention kept drifting to the shape of her hands, the faint line of concentration on her forehead. When she finally spoke, it wasn't to him. She laughed softly at something the barista said. Low, rich, a sound that made his chest tighten for no reason he could name. She was older, clearly. Not in a way that felt distant, but in the way she moved, deliberate, self-contained. Like she had already lived through 100 moments like this and didn't trust any of them. He didn't mean to stare, but she noticed. Of course she did. Her gaze met his again, sharper this time. Not an invitation, not yet, just acknowledgement. And for a moment, he forgot to breathe. When she left, she walked past his table. The faint scent of her perfume, something floral, something expensive, brushed against him. She stopped. You're in my way, she said, though there was enough space to pass. He mumbled an apology and moved his chair back. She smiled, small, almost secret. It's fine. He watched her go, the door closing behind her with a soft chime. But later that week, he saw her again, not at the cafe this time, but at the gallery where he worked part-time. She stood in front of a painting, one hand tracing the edge of the frame without touching it. Didn't think you liked art, he said quietly from behind her. She didn't turn. I like silence. Art just gives it shape. When she finally faced him, he caught it. That same look from the cafe, but deeper now. You work here? She asked. Sometimes. Then I'll ask you something. She tilted her head toward the painting. A stormy landscape, dark clouds pressing against the sea. Do you think it's about wanting to leave? She asked. Or wanting to be chased? He didn't know what to say. The question wasn't about the painting, and they both knew it. Her lips curved slightly, like she enjoyed his hesitation. I should go, she said. But she didn't move. He shifted closer, not touching, just close enough to feel her breath. You should, he murmured. Her eyes flicked to his mouth, then back up, steady. I should, she echoed. For a heartbeat. Nothing existed except that space between them. Fragile, magnetic, wrong in all the right ways. Then her phone buzzed. The spell broke. She stepped back, smoothing her sleeve. You should go home, she said, voice softer now. But her eyes didn't want him to move at all. And before he could speak, the gallery door opened, someone calling her name. She looked once more, like she wanted to say something she'd regret. Then she turned away. The door swung shut. The echo stayed. He hadn't meant to see her again. Yet a week later, he found himself standing in front of her house. A quiet, ivy-covered place at the end of the street where his best friend's mother lived. He hadn't connected the dots before. The cafe, the gallery, the subtle ring on her hand she no longer wore. But when the front door opened and she stepped out, wearing that same calm composure that made him forget simple words, it clicked. She froze, halfway down the steps. Evan. He nodded, awkwardly. Hey, Mrs. Hale. Her lips pressed together, a small, amused smile, though her eyes carried something heavier. You could have just said you were Mark's friend. He shrugged, unsure what to do with his hands. It didn't seem like the right time to mention it. Her laugh came quietly. And what would have been the right time? He didn't answer. The silence stretched, tender and uncomfortable. Her garden smelled of rain, damp soil, lilacs beginning to fade. The sound of the street seemed far away, like the world had pulled back just to watch them struggle with what not to say. He noticed the tiredness in her face now, the faint shadows near her eyes, the kind that don't come from sleepless nights, but from long years of holding yourself together. Mark said you lost your job, she said finally, that you're helping at the gallery until something else opens up. He nodded, trying to figure things out. Something softened in her expression. That never really stops, you know. Figuring things out. He smiled faintly. Doesn't look like it stopped for you either. Her eyes lifted, sharp but kind. You think you can tell that? I think you hide it well. She looked away then, toward the garden, toward anything that wasn't him. You should be careful saying things like that, Evan. He wanted to stop, but the words kept finding their way out. You don't make it easy to be careful. Her breath caught. He heard it, even though she tried to cover it with a small laugh. That's exactly the problem, she murmured. He almost said something else, but Mark's name hung in his mind like a warning. His best friend. Her son. Still, when she reached for the watering can beside him, their hands brushed. Neither of them moved. Her fingers were cool at first, then warm, the kind of warmth that lingers too long to be an accident. She didn't pull away. Not right away. I used to paint, she said softly. Her voice barely above the hum of the wind. Stopped years ago. After. Well, it doesn't matter now. It does, he said. Her gaze met his, not the polished, confident one she wore at the cafe, but something unguarded. Some things don't survive being looked at too closely. He swallowed hard. And some things do. A pause. The faint rustle of leaves. A kind of quiet that felt like gravity. She took a slow breath and let her hand fall away. You should go, she whispered. He nodded, but neither of them moved. And when he finally did, turning toward the gate, pretending it was easy, he felt it. Her eyes on his back. The way silence reached for him like a hand. That night, he couldn't stop thinking about the moment their fingers touched. How brief it was, and how everything inside him refused to let it go. It was late when he saw her again. Lights spilling from her living room. Curtains half drawn, shadows moving across the walls. He hadn't meant to stop by. He'd been walking home from work, rain starting to fall, and her porch light pulled him in like a quiet confession. He told himself it was just to say hello. Just to return the book she'd lent him the week before, a gesture safe enough to hide behind. When she opened the door, she looked surprised but not unhappy. A loose sweater hung off one shoulder, her hair tied back carelessly. The kind of softness she never let anyone see. Evan, she said, her voice low, warm from the lamplight. You're soaked. I was nearby, he managed, holding up the book like proof. Didn't want to ruin it. She stepped aside. You should come in. The house smelled faintly of cedar and something floral, the same perfume he remembered from the cafe. He stood by the door, dripping water onto the mat, watching her disappear into the kitchen. Mark's not here, she called out. He's staying at his dad's this week. The words landed heavier than she probably meant them to. When she came back with a towel, their fingers brushed. Again, too light to be deliberate, too long to ignore. He looked up. She was closer than before, close enough to see the faint freckle near her collarbone, the line of her pulse. You really shouldn't be here, she murmured. I know. Then why are you? He didn't answer. He couldn't. The silence stretched until it became something alive between them. She took the book from his hand, setting it aside, her fingers lingering on the cover. You're making this complicated. It already is, he said quietly. Her eyes searched his face, trying to find distance, but none of it would hold. You think this means something? She asked. He gave a small, uneven smile. You don't. That broke her. Not fully, just enough for her guard to slip. She exhaled, a trembling sound she didn't mean to let out, and for a moment, they stopped pretending. The rain hit harder outside. The air between them tightened. That same invisible pull from the cafe, only heavier now, full of everything they hadn't said. He moved first, barely, a step closer, until her breath brushed his skin. Her eyes flicked down, then up again. The smallest hesitation, a shared gravity. Then a sound, a car door slamming outside. She flinched, stepping back as if burned. Go, she whispered. Now. He froze. What? Just go. Her voice cracked this time. Please. Through the window, headlights swept across the wall, someone pulling into the driveway. He hesitated one heartbeat too long. She turned to him, eyes wide, lips parted, 1,000 things unsaid in a single glance. Evan, she breathed. Don't let them see you. He slipped out the back door into the rain, his pulse still caught in the space her voice had left behind. Behind him, through the glass, she stood in the half-dark, one hand pressed to her mouth, as if trying to stop herself from calling him back. The door stayed open. The rain didn't stop. and nothing between them would be the same again. He hadn't seen her for 2 weeks. Not since that night in the rain. Not since the headlights cut across her face and everything between them froze mid-breath. He tried to stay away. He really did. But the distance didn't quiet anything. It only made it louder. Every glance, every almost touch replayed in the quiet of his room like a secret that refused to fade. When she finally texted, "Can we talk?" He didn't think, he just went. The house was dim when she opened the door. Evening light leaked through the curtains, catching the edge of her cheekbone. She looked tired, maybe angry, but mostly resolved. "Mark's back?" he asked. "He's at a friend's." She stepped aside, and he entered. The air between them was too full, like even the walls knew they were breaking rules that couldn't be unbroken. She poured wine. One glass for her, one untouched on the counter for him. "You shouldn't have come back that night," she said. He looked at her. "Would it have changed anything if I hadn't?" Her laugh was small, humorless. "You think this is something we can just decide not to feel?" "Maybe not." She turned, finally meeting his eyes. "Then you don't understand what happens if we keep doing this." "Tell me," he said, voice soft, steady. She took a breath, then another, as if trying to calm herself. "You're too young, Evan. You're my son's friend. People talk. People destroy things. And I can't," she stopped. "I can't be that careless again." The last word caught his attention. Again. He stepped closer. "What happened before?" Her eyes flickered. Regret. Memory. Something half-buried. "Someone I shouldn't have trusted. I lost more than you can imagine." He wanted to ask more, but the way her voice cracked told him not to. Instead, he said quietly, "I'm not him." Her hand tightened on the glass. "You don't know what you're saying." "I do," he said. "Every time I try not to think about you, I just—" He stopped himself, but she already knew. She looked at him then, really looked. The kind of gaze that stripped away reason. Years, distance. The silence pressed closer. He took one step forward. She didn't move back. Another step, and now they were close enough that he could feel the warmth of her breath against his neck. Her hair brushed his hand, a ghost of contact that made him forget the rest of the world. "Evan," her voice broke softly on his name. He lifted his hand, not to touch, just to hover, waiting for her to stop him. She didn't. "You should go home," she whispered, the same words as before, but her voice trembled now, the sentence breaking on its own heartbeat. He leaned in, just slightly, until their foreheads almost touched. "I don't want to," he said. Her lips parted, a sharp breath, a tremor of surrender. Then, from outside, a voice, muffled, familiar. "Mom." They froze. Her eyes widened, horror and longing tangled together. She stepped back, hand trembling as she reached for the wineglass, as if pretending nothing had happened. The footsteps drew closer. She mouthed it this time, barely sound. "Go." He hesitated, heart pounding, his breath still caught in hers. And just before he turned toward the back door, she looked at him one last time, eyes shining, silent, and full of everything she couldn't say. The sound of the doorknob turning cut the air in two. He didn't see her for days after that night. After the sound of the doorknob, the sharp break in everything that had been building between them. Mark had been the one at the door. Of course. Her son. His friend. Evan couldn't read what he'd seen, if anything. Maybe it was nothing, just bad timing. Or maybe he'd seen the way she'd looked at Evan a second too long before the door opened. The silence that followed had felt like a blade balanced on air. Now, a week later, Evan was back at the gallery, the place where all of it had begun. The room was quiet except for the soft creak of floorboards and the rain tapping against the tall glass windows. He heard footsteps before he saw her. That same perfume, faint, like a memory. He turned. "Mrs. Hale," he said, but his voice faltered halfway through. She shook her head gently. "Don't. Not here." Her tone was sharper than he expected, but her eyes gave her away. She wasn't angry. She was terrified. "I need to know what he said," he began. She exhaled, closing her eyes briefly. "Mark asked if you'd been here. He thinks you're helping me with something." I told him yes. "That's not a lie." "No," she said. "But it's not the truth either." She stepped closer, glancing toward the empty doorway before lowering her voice. "You shouldn't have come tonight. Someone could see. I don't care anymore." "Well, I do." Her words trembled at the edges, like she wanted to believe them. He took a small step forward. "You keep saying that, but you don't mean it." Her breath hitched, barely audible, but he heard it. "Evan." He stopped her name with a whisper. You could have told him to stay away. You didn't. For a long moment, she said nothing. Then, quietly, you think I haven't tried? Her hand trembled as she adjusted her necklace. The same nervous habit he'd noticed the first day. Every time I tell myself to stop, she said, you show up in some memory I didn't invite. It's like trying to forget a song that keeps playing in the background. He smiled faintly, almost in pain. Then stop pretending you don't hear it. The rain grew heavier. The gallery lights flickered. She moved past him, close enough that her shoulder brushed his arm. A soft, accidental touch that wasn't accidental at all. He turned, the scent of her perfume lingering between them. I found something, she said, almost to herself. The night you left. She pulled a folded paper from her bag. A sketch, faint pencil lines of the storm painting she'd once stood before. Only this time, the figure in the distance wasn't faceless. It was him. He stared at it, at the rough outline of his posture, the way she'd captured something too intimate to explain. You drew this, he asked quietly. Her lips parted, but she didn't answer. Her eyes did. You shouldn't have seen that, she whispered. Then why bring it? A pause. The soft sound of rain swallowing her silence. Because, she said finally, I wanted to know if it was wrong to keep wanting something that's already ruined me once. He reached for the sketch, his fingers brushing hers. Neither of them let go. Outside, a car door slammed again. Only this time, she didn't flinch. She just looked at him, a faint, reckless glimmer in her eyes. What if he already knows? She said. The question hung between the storm had passed, but the air still smelled like rain. That heavy, electric quiet that follows after everything's been said except the truth. They stood in the gallery again, the sketch between them. The faint graphite lines blurred where her fingers had smudged the edges, as if she'd touched it too many times, trying to undo what she'd drawn. Evan didn't speak. Neither did she. There was no room left for pretending. She was the first to look away. You shouldn't have come, she said, though her voice lacked conviction. He stepped closer, slow enough that she could stop him if she wanted to. She didn't. You keep saying that, he murmured. But every time I leave, you find a way to call me back. Her lips curved, not quite a smile. Maybe I'm tired of being the one who stays careful. He swallowed, heart hammering. Then stop. She met his gaze again, and this time, there was no wall between them. Just the quiet understanding of what they both knew. That wanting had turned into something neither of them could hide behind anymore. He reached out, brushing a strand of hair from her cheek. His hand lingered, trembling slightly. She didn't pull away. Evan, she said softly, his name more breath than sound. He leaned in, close enough to feel her exhale against his skin. The world outside disappeared. No rain, no guilt, no sun, no rules. Just the fragile sound of two people standing close to what they shouldn't want. I can't do this, she whispered. I've already lost too much. He shook his head. You haven't lost me yet. Her eyes softened, the same look she'd given him that first day in the cafe, when silence said more than words ever could. You don't understand, she said. This doesn't end with a clean line. It ends with someone getting hurt. Then let it be me, he said quietly. The air between them tightened. She moved, just a breath closer, her hand hovering near his chest, as if afraid of what would happen if she touched him. When she finally did, her fingers rested over his heartbeat, tentative, trembling. For a long moment, they stayed there, motionless, suspended between choice and consequence. Then she closed her eyes. You make me feel young again, she whispered. And that terrifies me. He smiled faintly, his voice raw. Maybe that's what we both needed. Her eyes opened, clear now, wet at the edges but steady. It's never just about need. He nodded, understanding. Whatever this was, it wasn't something they could live inside forever. But neither could they pretend it hadn't happened. The sketch slipped from her hand, drifting to the floor. He caught her wrist before it fell completely. Their foreheads touched, breaths tangled, the world holding still. Then she pulled back, slowly, gently, enough to leave the space filled with everything that couldn't be said aloud. You should go, she murmured again. This time, it wasn't a dismissal. It was a plea. He looked at her one last time, memorizing the quiet ache in her face, the way she still hadn't let go of his hand. I will, he said, but not yet. And as the gallery lights flickered out one by one, they stayed there, inches apart, caught between goodbye and something that refused to end. In them, fragile, Dangerous, irreversible. Morning came soft and gray, the kind of light that doesn't demand anything, just settles quietly over what's left. Evan hadn't meant to see her again. After that night in the gallery, he'd promised himself to let it end there, with silence, with restraint, with that unfinished space between them. But endings rarely listen to promises. She found him instead. It was early, the cafe nearly empty. He was nursing a cup gone cold when the door opened, the small bell above it chiming like the memory of their first glance. She stepped in wearing no pretense this time. Hair loose, no makeup, a cardigan drawn around her shoulders. The kind of simplicity that disarmed him more than anything else. "Still pretending you like this place?" she asked, sliding into the seat across from him. He smiled faintly. "Still pretending to avoid me?" Her laugh came softly, the way it had that very first day, low, unguarded. It filled the quiet like something returning home. For a while, neither of them spoke. They just sat there, the sound of spoons against cups, rain against glass, the rhythm of something familiar and fragile. "I thought about what you said," she murmured finally. "Which part?" "The part where you told me I hadn't lost you yet." Her fingers traced the rim of her mug, slow and uncertain. "You were right. I was just afraid of what it would mean if I hadn't." He looked at her, the strength in her eyes, the softness she didn't try to hide anymore. "And now I'm tired of being afraid." He leaned forward slightly. "So what do we do?" Her hand found his, not hesitantly this time, not by accident. Just quiet, deliberate contact. Their fingers intertwined, warm, steady. "We stop fighting what's already here," she said. He let out a slow breath, the kind that felt like release. "That easy?" She smiled. "Nothing about this is easy. But it doesn't have to be wrong to be real." Outside, the rain began to slow. Inside, the world narrowed to the small space between their hands. He turned her palm upward, brushing his thumb along the inside of her wrist, a small, wordless thank you. She tilted her head, studying him the way she used to study paintings, with patience, with care. "You're still too young for me," she said quietly. "And you're still too impossible to forget." Her smile deepened, sadness and warmth mingled in equal measure. She leaned in, close enough that he could feel her breath against his skin. Instead of a kiss, she rested her forehead against his, still, human, real. No fireworks, no grand declarations. Just two people who had run out of ways to hide from what mattered. When she pulled back, she exhaled, almost laughing at herself. "You should go home," she whispered again. But this time, it wasn't to send him away. It was a promise that he'd always have a place to return to. He smiled. "Only if you'll be there." Her fingers tightened around his once more, an answer without words. The rain outside turned to sunlight. The cafe door stayed open, and for the first time, neither of them looked away. Did you enjoy the story? Would you like to hear more stories like this? Quiet, forbidden, and human? What kind of love story should come next?